Hello. Hi. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hello. Here we are. Me, Jorb, Loftar, back in business. Hey, everyone. We decided to just kick it right off.
We're just sitting here waiting anyway.
Yep. So, how's everyone doing? Good, I hope. We're not going to do anything in particular today since we have Loftar on. I figured we might as well just get to all the questions that I'm sure you guys have for him. Other than that, I'm just gonna keep on grinding away with my character, much like last time. So that's what we're up to. We're pretty good. So Loftar, start us off by telling about the thing you're working on. How are we doing with that?
Well, I don't know. It's as I mean, I already said that in a forum thread somewhere, but it's a fairly complex issue, and I'm almost considering just doing some lengthier write up on it. Not I'm not entirely sure how meaningful it is to try and go into detail here, but I guess I could try.
Explain it to me as if I were a child. What are we doing? What's taking so long?
Well, I mean, the thing is, there are. I mean, in this client rewrite that I'm doing, there are a couple of.
Establish the context. What are we doing?
We are rewriting the client.
Why are we rewriting?
Yeah, that's the issue, isn't it? We are rewriting the rendering system in particular.
Exactly.
And I mean, the root reason, I guess, is performance, first and foremost.
The client has too poor performance for our tastes.
And there are a couple of things that I'm doing to remedy that. Some of them being more in the future tense, some of them being more in the present tense. I mean, how to put it, in terms of the architecture of the new rendering system, the root of that is really the reason I have chosen the architecture I have is more for future reasons, in order to have a rendering system that can be compatible with both OpenGL and Vulkan in the future. Now, unfortunately, I think I've said this sometime previously as well, but there doesn't currently seem to be a good way to integrate Vulkan into Java, and so a Vulkan backend isn't coming immediately. But obviously, I want the rendering system to be written with a future Vulkan implementation in mind.
Right on. So
I mean, the current rendering system is very explicitly based on OpenGL. It does OpenGL calls directly and everything.
and OpenGL is being phased out in favor of Vulkan.
More or less, at least.
What are we doing?
I slightly suspect that if you were to ask the OpenGL architects, they wouldn't agree with that. With that characterization, but more or less, Vulkan is better for performance either way.
So what is OpenGL and what is Vulkan?
Well, they are graphics APIs to talk to the graphics hardware.
Where
quite simply.
graphics APIs. Exactly. So you are rewriting the client with a new rendering architecture to.
Yeah, exactly. And the other half of the rendering architecture, that's part of what I already wrote in the client rendering thread on the forum. But the big issue there is trying to keep persistent information between frames, quite simply, so as to not have to recalculate a lot of things here and there, because that's what's taking the majority of CPU time right now. And I guess that might be a segue into another important aspect of it, namely that there is a difference between CPU optimization and GPU optimization. And what I'm currently doing is primarily CPU optimization, so the rewrite of the rendering system itself isn't going to have much effect on people who are experiencing poor GPU performance, quite simply.
So if you have a shitty graphics card, you're not going to be helped by this.
Not by the rewrite in itself, anyway. That being said, it allows me to do some interesting things that might help, such.
And if we ever get a Vulkan implementation for Java, then that might be beneficial as well, right?
Not for the GPU side.
Right.
Again,
isn't Vulkan better GPU wise?
Not really. It's more just a better way to feed information to the GPU. It doesn't change what happens on the GPU side.
I know.
But that being said, as I said, it still allows me to do some interesting things that may be good for the GPU side too. It's just that the rewrite in itself is not doing anything for the GPU side.
Here's all my golds that I got last time, generously donated to me by kind players. So I haven't been playing.
Worth noting that I still have more gold from just selling guano.
You've been making a killer profit.
Yeah,
selling.
no joke.
He's been selling guano to the community fair. He has so many shekels.
Well, it was big shekels back then, at least.
Exactly.
I think the prices have fallen a bit and stuff. I guess I just dumped the market.
Goodness, he's a market manipulator, just like China. So there was a question here. Zeno Vyvern asks, have you guys considered outside help? Let's see, outside help with the game, even if just for the client rewrite, or perhaps finding developers that have worked with OpenGL in the past? Have we ever considered that?
Well, I mean, I guess we've talked about it, but I'm not sure really how we would go about getting someone else on the project, so to speak.
Exactly.
At least without paying money that we probably don't have for that.
Exactly. Not too sold on that Zeno Vyvern. I don't think we want the help, truth be told. I mean, part of building the game, I suppose, is at least to some extent also a bit of a learning experience. So
Certainly.
When developing, when using OpenGL or any other technology, I suppose, I mean, you learn a bit along the way. That's part of what makes it fun, I suppose.
I mean, it's the client. This client rewrite is a pretty meaningful project to me, in the way that this time around, so to speak, I feel I at least feel like I'm actually writing a real graphics engine.
Yep. You've been happy about that, from what I understand from talking to you.
Yeah, pretty much.
So what's the problem with how we've gone about that in the past in Salem and in
Well, I mean, the thing is, Salem, writing the initial 3D implementation for Salem was, I mean, certainly it was very much a learning experience for me. It was the first time I was dealing with 3D graphics at all, really.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting learning OpenGL, because almost primarily because there's a lot of information about OpenGL out there, which is,
outdated.
Yes, I mean, really outdated.
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, that being said, though, there's also a reason I was using older OpenGL in for the Salem client too, because back then I wanted to be compatible with really old graphics cards that really didn't even implement OpenGL 2.
Right on.
But we've ditched them since then anyway.
Yeah. Why did we ditch the old graphics card then?
Primarily because some of the effects we wanted in Haven, like cell shading and outlines,
right.
That was a big part of the reason, I think.
Yep.
And also just to clean that mess up seriously, because
you have to move on at some point, right?
I mean, supporting OpenGL 1 and OpenGL 2 is really quite a chore.
Quite something.
Yes.
So how would you? What's your timeline? Or rather, since I know you can't give time estimates,
exactly.
what are the steps on the road to completion for the project?
Yeah, that's a good question. How to even organize that information? I mean,
First, you have a rendering list that you're working on.
I mean, there's to begin with, there's an immediate project and an extended project too. Right. I mean, I'm not, by the time I release this client rewrite, I'm not going to be done with everything.
Right.
That's just going to be the new rendering system, and then I can proceed from there to further optimizations. I mean, the first thing I did, which I'm done with, is writing a so to speak immediate mode implementation of the new rendering API, so to speak.
Right.
Whereby immediate mode, I mean things that can't really be cached from cycle to cycle, or that aren't meaningful to cache from cycle to cycle, like drawing the UI. That's never a performance issue anyway, so I haven't bothered with trying to accelerate that in any way. Or stuff that really is only drawn one frame and never again, like the FPS counters or whatever. So that is complete and works pretty much. Then what I'm currently doing then is implementing the actual 3D part of it that involves. I mean, it's easier to contrast with the current rendering system, which uses a pretty traditional take draw loop, so to speak, where every object is asked to render itself, so to speak. Whereas what I want to translate this into is a system where objects register themselves persistently with the rendering system and only affect the relevant updates from one frame to the next, rather than recalculating all the states.
So hopefully saving some calculations in the process.
Indeed, that's the point.
Sounds like a worthy project.
And that's where I am right now, and that obviously has a number of sub-steps too. But I'm not sure just how much detail it's meaningful to go into here.
Sure. So that's the bottom line is that you're working on it, and the ambition then is to increase the CPU performance of the client rendering.
Yeah, indeed. It's I guess it's particularly worth noting that as part of the extended project, that is beyond the pushing the actual rewritten client, are such things as instancing of what do you call it, skeletal animated
objects, like for example hearthlings.
Like for example hearthlings, like for example livestock and animals.
So one of the things that I've noticed on my computer, I have a decent computer, like it's, what is it, 2-3 years old now, and one of the things that I've noticed is that one of the scenes that causes a great deal of problems for me are, you know, scenes with tons of animals in them.
Yeah, the livestock scenes seem to be a great problem in general, I think.
Yeah,
and
oftentimes when I come across like abandoned bases with, you know, corpses strewn to the rafters, you know, with piggy litter corpses and whatnot, I find that my client usually can grind to a halt if the problem is bad enough.
Yeah, the same here. Obviously, I don't even have such a good computer, but nevertheless. It seems to me that one of the greater problems with, you know, big village scenes is primarily livestock, and that's why it's important. That's one of the reasons why it's important to instantify such rendering. And I also speculate. I mean, again, I've never been able to reproduce this problem myself, but when people complain about getting 3 FPS in PvP, I suspect that's the issue. Again, though, I haven't been able to reproduce
because
this.
I've had some complaints about the new bat dungeons that we recently introduced as well, that people were getting poor FPS in the dungeons, and I suspect that's on account of the bats.
Yeah, most likely, not least the den mothers.
Exactly, they can be quite prolific.
Yeah.
So I suspect that the problem that they're having.
I hadn't heard of that, but I would imagine that to be the case.
They're encountering a bunch of bats, and then the client can't handle all the skeletal animation of all the bats.
Yeah.
So you have some pretty nifty tricks planned out for that, right? For the instantiation of
yeah, what I'm slightly worried about there is potentially losing compatibility with some hardware.
Yeah.
Because instantiating skeletal animated meshes in the way I imagine to do it requires a technique called texture fetch in the vertex shader. And I know that not all GPUs support that. Most of them do, but not all.
So basically you're going to cheat the GPU by uploading a ton of information through a texture.
Yeah, exactly. Because skeletal animations are too much data to upload to traditional instancing means.
Exactly. So as of right now, and you still even do the calculation for the mesh deform on
the CPU side, yes. That would also change by that.
You're going to move that to the GPU instead.
Yeah. The reason, by the way, that mesh deformations happen on the CPU side is also very much for compatibility with older hardware right now.
So the thing is that when you have a mesh animated object, essentially you have a mesh of points, and you have a skeleton going through that mesh. And each vertex in the mesh has a weight with which it is bound to a particular bone. So what you do when you calculate the mesh animation or the mesh deformation is that you go through the entire skeleton, you find all the rotations
and the vertices rather.
Well, you have to establish the frame of the skeleton.
Yeah, sure, that's true. But that I still imagine would happen on the CPU side. I don't think that's very expensive.
Sure.
The expensive part is going through all the vertices and moving them according to what the skeleton dictates.
Exactly.
And that should be done on the GPU side instead.
Which is the reason why that's hard to instantiate. Normally, you
Yes,
can
exactly.
exactly.
That being said, though, it's fair. It may be important to note that I mean, dead animals, for instance, since they aren't actually animated, they aren't recalculated every frame, so that part of it actually doesn't happen for dead animals. And I expect the big reason dead animals are expensive is more to do with the fact that since they each have their own set of vertices, through OpenGL you effectively have to switch between different vertex array objects for each object that's being drawn, and that appears to be a big deal in modern OpenGL, and that's actually one of those interesting things about about learning OpenGL for the first time, because in many of the tutorials you find on the web for OpenGL, it's often stated that the most expensive thing you can do is switching textures.
Yeah. Which is not true then.
Which I suspect was true in the 90s.
That's a long time ago.
Yep. Actually, I did read about that once when I was reading about the Nintendo 64 hardware, that the reason texture switches was so expensive back then was because when texturing a polygon, the entire texture was uploaded into the GPU's cache. Into the GPU cache, and then could only be read from there. So every time you switch texture, it had to re-upload a new texture to the GPU. whereas since at least 15 years back, every texture has been sitting in GPU memory to begin with. So I mean, texture switches aren't free, but they are. I've been testing caching texture switches different ways, and I have not seen a performance difference in trying to minimize texture switches, quite simply.
We had a fun comment here from Ardennes TV, and on today's dev stream, Jorb and Loftar have a conversation that they've had before, and people watch it and nod while they pretend to understand.
Well, that's not entirely true, I think. I don't think we have had every detail of this conversation previously.
We've had like the separate parts, with every new hole is every new constellation of the parts.
I mean, we've spoken about similar things, obviously. That much is true for sure.
We may have touched on the subject.
May have, yes.
So so basically that's the stream. I love that stream premise though. If anyone has great ideas for what we're going to do with our character, I'm thinking I would like to build a palisade, and I would maybe like to claim my land as well. Ooh, whatchamacallit?
A firefly.
Firefly, indeed.
Yes, multiple light sources, speaking of client rendering.
Absolutely. So what's the word on multiple light sources? Right now the client supports
Wish I had any.
3
4 actually.
4.
But the sun is always
right, sure. There's the sun, and then there are 3 more.
Yeah.
But we're gonna introduce a slider for that, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And also, I mean, one of the things that I think we are going to do as part of the extended project for the GPU performance is they introduce a detailed slider of some kind too.
Jordan Colsey asks, would it be helpful for me to send you videos of low performance instances? I have plenty of flight videos.
I don't think so. I mean, that doesn't help me at all trying realizing what OpenGL calls are taking time.
It's fun. Often when I get bug reports, I get like strange screenshots, and just people expect me to decode them automatically.
I especially like it when those screenshots are just some monochrome terrain with red boxes on them, and we are supposed to understand what's going on.
What's going on? Because my stream is lagging out here on my other screen. I hope you guys aren't experiencing problems. If you are, please do let me know.
Or have we lost webs? No.
No, I don't think so. No, we seem to be live still. It's probably just a loading issue. I even got an itsy bitsy spider there. So we have some other comments. Artemis WHB asks, what about the millions of coordinate objects being created?
I would argue that people who state that have no idea how modern Java works. Because the vast majority of those coordinate objects are stack allocated and therefore don't take time or bandwidth allocation. And all the rest of them anyway are allocated in the hidden generation and collected ephemerally, so they don't really matter either.
You heard it here first.
And for that matter, when speaking of allocation bandwidth, I have it on good authority from a heap profiler that the vast majority of bandwidth allocation bandwidth, I mean, is actually the OpenGL command lists being created.
So there's your answer to that, Artemis.
Which, by the way, since the new rendering system is actually saving command lists from frame to frame, that's going to decrease their allocation bandwidth requirements too. So that's a good thing. Which is also interesting for Java 9, because I did notice that Java 9 includes a new whatchamacallit, garbage collector. Which in theory is better for Haven, because it's a more parallel collector that stops the world less and therefore takes away some of the local lag spikes in the client. But the problem with it when I've tested it is it's like it makes the whole program like 30% slower.
That doesn't sound good.
No, indeed, it really isn't. And I don't know exactly why. Obviously, it's hard to benchmark that. But I suspect that is because the client is doing a whole lot of allocations in terms of those command lists. And so if they are being allocated less, that should be a lesser problem for that garbage collector, and therefore that theoretically better garbage collector should be more useful to us.
So here's a question from Big Dick Johnstone. Big Dick Johnstone asks, I like pancakes. Do you like pancakes? I like pancakes. Do you like pancakes?
Oh, I like pancakes.
Oh,
Though I do think I prefer Swedish pancakes to American ones.
Of course.
Of course. Very good.
Very good. You know it. I think we had pancakes when we were in the United States in, like, what was that, 2010?
Yeah, we might have had.
I believe we had pancakes.
Honestly, it was actually quite a long time since I last ate pancakes.
It's not something you whip up a batch of at home then?
No, not commonly.
No, regularly, no.
I mean, traditionally, I've eaten it with pea soup.
Right on.
But
It's a Swedish traditional classic, by the way, pea soup and pancakes.
On Thursdays.
Yeah, Thursdays. It's from the army.
It is?
Not yet.
It is? I didn't know that.
Traditional army food. Nothing either of us would be familiar with.
I wasn't aware of that. I mean, the last time I did that was basically when I was living at home, since I don't do that anymore. The pea soup is usually enough for me, quite simply. So
should have pea soup in Haven.
We should have soups in Haven generally, but that's a problem.
That's true. Jordan Cozy asked, Ardens asked earlier, will the client rendering rewrite break all currently custom clients? For sure, right?
To some extent, at least. I mean, to the extent that their modifications are only to the widget system, they shouldn't be affected at all. But to the extent that they are in the rendering system, they will be very much affected. Speaking of which, though, I have noted, and I have been wondering if this is a mistake on Amber's part. No, wait a minute, he's not called Amber, he's called Romos. I have been wondering if this is a mistake on his part or intentional, but I have noticed that he has reformatted the entire client code indentation-wise, which it seems to me means that every time he merges my code, he gets conflicts for every change that I have made, and that must be very inconvenient for him unless his IDE handles that automatically or something. I've been wondering how he handles that.
So Romovs, if you hear this, please inform Loftar as to how you're handling that.
Indeed.
There was a question up here. Lord Pale asks, at last stream there was talk about the slime issue. At the time I thought that
there's a slime issue?
That it was fine the way it was, but since then it seems they have become more of an issue to deal with than trolls. I think he's complaining about the fact that when you're mining on the lower cave levels,
is he trying to imply that
apparently he considers it a problem that he gets
slimes have become more prevalent since then, though, because I don't think that should
I think it's probably his estimation of the problem that it's changed based on experiences that he has had. That would be my interpretation of what he said.
I see.
What I noticed is that no one has left new votes for me. I had hoped to come back to some new votes. Last stream we did, people had left runestones here, and these are the negative votes, where it's like, fuck you, move out, Jorb equals Hitler. Maybe that's a positive vote. Maybe that's a yes vote from a Nazi. Maybe that was a Nazi yes vote. Who knows? And then there was this Russian one, which I was told meant something like Dees will, roof will stomp me.
Does it say psykopat at the end, or no? It doesn't, does it?
No clue. So what do we think about slimes?
I don't know, honestly. I'm not mining that awfully much these days anyway, and when I do, it's mostly on like the first cave level.
Yeah, I'm not mining a ton either, but like I have done mining a significant amount. I have all the mine-related credos, including Cave Hermit. So I've done a fair share of mining.
One would think you should be experienced in the issue then.
Reasonably, I think. And I personally haven't found slimes to be that big of an issue. I mean, they're a pain when they do spawn, especially if they spawn. They can be, at least if they spawn in like large groups and such. But I don't think it's a huge problem. But I get a lot of complaints about it. But my response to those complaints has historically been that if you're mining on cave level 5, you know, I think you should have some problems, right?
Yeah, one should think so. I think that being said, I don't know how to what extent this is the issue for the person you just quoted, whoever that was. But I suspect that a large part of the reason why people are complaining about it is because they are using their mine rolls that don't have combat values. And to the extent that that is true, I would argue that that's their problem.
Sure. I think it's
right.
Sure. I think it's not unreasonable to expect that, you know, people mining on the lower cave levels should have
at least some combat
experience.
Yeah,
definitely.
I mean, speaking of that, if anything, I have been wanting to make the lower cave levels harsher, but I have been stopped by Jorb.
My thinking recently has actually been that we should probably introduce a couple of more cave levels, maybe bring it up to like 10 levels or such, and then have a greater degree of differentiation between them.
I see.
In terms of difficulty and such.
Why though?
Could be fun with more levels.
Yeah, sure, but I mean 5 is pretty many.
I don't think so. I mean, you mine down to level 5 pretty fast, and I wouldn't mind if like the mine.
Yeah, but isn't that the issue then? I mean, it's very easy to build mine holes down to level 5.
Sure, but it's every level you descend is a reward in and of itself. You feel a sense of accomplishment when you descend a level. So if there are more levels to descend, you feel a greater sense of accomplishment.
I guess. I mean, it's not that I mind, I guess.
So what we're Mordaglu something asks, when wipe, with no less than 4 question marks at the end. So he really wants to know. That's what I.
Yeah, that's.
He really wants to know. And the only answer we're going to give here is that when we want to wipe the world, we will announce that in good and due order, and we have no further comments on the subject.
Indeed.
It'll happen when it'll happen. But I can guarantee you that the client rendering rewrite is going to happen first.
Yes, that is true under all circumstances.
Any and all circumstances. So Mr. Softner asks seasons, and he has no less than, what is that even? Like 10 question marks after. So he really wants to know when seasons are going to happen.
Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it?
It is.
I too have been wondering from time to time, really.
Yeah.
I mean, for one thing, I don't think that obviously is also one of those projects that isn't really meaningful to get into before the client rewrite is done. And it should also be, it should perhaps be said at this point that this is part of the reason why we have been starting to prioritize the client rendering project, because we have been piling up stuff that feel less than meaningful to do while that's still ongoing.
Let's get back to this. There was one interesting comment I wanted to read here from PWNJ Jimmy Poon.
Okay.
Jimmy Poon.
Okay.
Own Jimmy own. Thanks for making this game. I am a new player. I brought in 7 people with me, and a few of them really love it as well. Speaking on the slime thing, sounds like people are complaining about not being prepared to fight or defend themselves. I just wanted to say thank you, Jimmy, for bringing people to the game. That's what I really wanted to.
Not prepared to fight or defend themselves. Yeah.
That's what you said as well. Like
exactly.
They're bringing inexperienced miners to the
I mean, are slimes even a problem at all on level 1?
Don't think so, not to me. Let me know in the chat what you feel about that. Are slimes a problem on level 1?
Because there may perhaps be some kind of case to be made that level 1 should be more lenient. I'm not sure though.
I'm not
I mean,
sure
it is still a cave level.
Yeah, I think it's pretty lenient as is actually. I don't think it needs to be more lenient. Truth be told. I think this is a common problem that we have whenever we introduce something that is, slightly challenging, we get like immediate calls for nerfs. I think it's a pattern I tend to see.
Not strictly true though. I mean, it's not true for Battlefield Dungeons. Well, I guess to some extent it is.
I don't know, maybe not. Maybe I don't know, maybe what people find annoying about the slimes is precisely the fact that they are annoying. Rather than
Certainly I can see
rather
that.
than the fact that they're hard.
Yeah, I can see that. I did see that critique, that exact critique somewhere that boar arms are more fun.
Yep.
Because they have fun movement patterns and whatnot.
Sure.
Whereas slimes are just annoying, and I can perhaps see that, but still though.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. There might be some case to be made that slimes are a bit common still. I think we've toned them down once, but maybe we could tone them down further.
And arguably also the fact that they are annoying is perhaps a problem with the combat system.
Yeah. Maybe, no, maybe. Mario F Damage says slimes can be problems on any level when there's 7+ and you can't easily switch targets easily. Yeah, I mean the targeting could be an issue there.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're standing in a flock
Yeah,
of them and
certainly.
you can't really find any.
Yeah, targeting is an issue for sure.
Yeah.
I guess that was one of the reasons that we initially wanted to try more movement-based combat system, or angle-based, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But that obviously had its own set of problems. I'm not sure what to think about that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean the reason we tried that when we redesigned the combat system, we went into it with the initial value that what we wanted to do was something more.
Click on a point and hit in that direction.
Exactly. But the problem that we found with that was that it seemed to leave a lot of room for client-based support in terms of auto aiming.
Yeah, it seemed that would be the main issue.
Yeah.
Quite simply, really. I mean, if the main challenge is pointing the mouse in the right direction, then a bot is certainly going to do that better.
Yeah. Which would kind of remove the entire challenge of it.
Yeah. Not sure to what extent this has been a problem in Salem though.
I think there were.
I think there were auto aimers, but nevertheless, I feel.
I think I can guarantee you that we would have auto aimers here.
Yeah, certainly, but there's also the case to be made, at least that in Salem there was a long wind up, which made the act of actually aiming less of a thing, and we did try to avoid that this time.
Yeah.
For reasons of fun, but that is also what made the situation worse.
H&H Granger says hotkey to select nearest opponent. This.
Yeah, sure.
Could be a thing.
Certainly not a bad thing.
Let's see. Were there other questions here? Answer from Romos. Well, he uses a really non-Java idiomatic formatting for Java. How I handle the changes with lots of tears and cursing.
Yeah, I just mean, wouldn't it surely be better to deal with my non-idiomatic formatting than to resolve conflicts every time you merge anything at all?
Romance, let us know in the chat.
No, just wondering.
Onep of the Potted Plant says hello. Hi, Onep. It's nice to meet you.
Oh, Onep.
Yeah. Onep is in the stream. Ike Dragon asks for when seasons will be. Yeah, we were talking about.
Yeah,
seasons.
we were talking about seasons, yes, and how that was being delayed by the client rewrite.
Exactly.
That being said, I don't think season system are the first thing we're going to touch once we're done with that, right?
Object controlled objects. Object
Indeed.
controlled objects is what I want at least. I think for me, I have two main projects on the longer term to-do list. One being object control objects, the other being seasons.
Yeah, and I think we have agreed to prioritize object control objects first.
on the assumption that it matters more for actual gameplay than seasons do.
Yeah, exactly. That being said, seasons would also be really nice. But,
yeah, it would. I think it would give a lot better sense of change in the world and like progression of the world. And
definitely. Not to mention actual real life occasions would feel much more meaningful if it was actually snowing during Christmas.
Yep, exactly. So, but Aiki Dragon asks, for when seasons will be implemented, there ought to be, besides the season-specific texture meshes, weather along with weather effects such as snow, rain. How do you think this will affect the overall performance of the new render client, and do you think it will be switched off the next day via custom clients?
Well, everything will always be switched off in custom clients, not even because of performance, but just because it gives you that slight edge in competitive PvP.
Exactly.
So, so of course it will be switched off.
I mean, ideally, a Skynet bot runs the entire PvP.
I mean, honestly, I don't really understand why they aren't just displaying a big table of objects and their coordinates.
Exactly.
But that being said, I think there are two parts to that question. Partly the weather, the season-induced graphical changes themselves, and partly weather effects. I don't think the season-induced graphical changes are going to be a performance issue at all. I mean, that's just different graphics, quite simply.
Exactly.
Whereas weather...
We're already using a texture for the trees, so it would
yeah,
be a different
just
texture.
changing that texture isn't going to make it worse in any way. Whereas weather effects, I mean, that obviously depends on what you're doing.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it might also be argued, interestingly, that we could do weather effects before we do seasons, and that could be meaningful in and of itself.
Absolutely.
That's too being typically one of those things that we should do after the climb tree, right? Though, but still,
like get a sniffles cold every time you're out in the rain. And
yeah.
Lots of interesting new wounds that could pop up.
Yeah, and then volume fog and stuff would be really nice in the mornings and
absolutely
whatnot. That much is definitely true, but I think most of the weather effects I can think of shouldn't be awfully performance draining. I think
that's my thinking as well. It shouldn't be that big of a deal.
I think so, at least. I mean, like, yeah, basically.
I mean, snow is just a couple of vertices falling down or whatever. Like
it doesn't seem like a big deal, at least.
It does not. So exactly. So seasons are on our to-do list, but not our first priority, but rather perhaps more like our second priority.
Yeah.
And object control objects is like a big thing, so that leads into a lot of like branches of development.
Yeah.
From
I mean, the object control objects in themselves obviously don't do anything to gameplay at all.
Exactly.
but they allow us to do such things as bridges.
Which would be awesome.
Yes, and ships that you can walk around on. Which would also be awesome, and hopefully also custom building.
Yeah.
I mean, that is obviously more of a how do you put it? I mean, that's not just something that we can quickly throw in because we have object control objects, because it obviously needs to be defined in some meaningful gameplay wise way.
Like, ultimately, I think the big selling point for me for object control objects is, I mean, bridges are a huge thing. Bridges would be awesome. That would be a lot of fun, and also things like having actual walls that you can walk on, on top of, standing up on the by the.
Even without custom building, it would be nice to just be able to stand on top of the current stone towers.
Exactly, or on the stone towers, or make a building which you can stand upon and blah blah. Blah. So there are a lot of selling points, but one of the major selling points that I'm looking forward to is a more custom building system.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is obviously a project in and of itself. Like just completing object control object means nothing. That does not imply that we have a custom building system.
No, exactly.
That's something that needs.
At that point, we have to decide how custom building should actually work.
Yeah, exactly.
Quite simply.
And be implemented. At that point, we simply have the systems available to be able to have a meaningful discussion about that, I suppose. And I would imagine perhaps that I see custom building happening before seasons.
Yeah, I should hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, it is clearly the big selling point for object control objects, and I don't think it should have to be mentioned that it's something we have wanted Haven to have forever.
No.
I mean, implementing I do remember implementing just custom placeable inner walls, like in the first
It's actually one
few
of the,
months of the
yeah,
project.
it's one of the first things we did when we were developing Legacy Haven was we
Yeah.
introduced what he said, like just one tile
Wall
walls,
pieces that you could place.
wall pieces that you could place.
I think that was the point at which we realized that implementing custom building is more than just placing walls, though.
Exactly. It was a big deal, you know, with the roofs and everything, and we kind of left the project there somewhere. Like there were a lot of threads in the early like development stages that we kind of dropped, I suppose, and never picked up again.
Yeah,
Them
like
being-
NPC villages.
yeah, NPC villages, and yeah, that being one of them. So on that note, Eustace Badgie asks, Loftar, is the current state of the game still true to what you were envisioning earlier in the development?
Well, to a very large extent, I'd say. Right.
Yeah.
I'd say so. I mean, there are a few things that have changed. Especially, like I said, NPC villages were something we were originally envisioning.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say we've dropped that thread entirely and have decided that that's something we never want,
No.
but clearly it has not been a priority.
Yeah.
But I mean, the big issue, the big thing with Haven has always just been the persistent world and being able to affect it, and that I think the game is still very much true to.
Yep. I agree. And yeah, I mean there were a couple of threads like custom building and NPCs and stuff that because in the I don't know if you remember this, but in one of the earlier worlds in old Legacy Haven we had an inn where there was a barmaid who we had a trivial conversation system implemented that we apparently found the time to.
There should be some people remembering it at least.
Yeah. That we spent some time on. So there was a barmaid there where you could have a meaningless conversation with her, and those are things that I definitely would like to return to and pick up and make more out of. Like now that we have the NPCs that we do have in terms of the trees and the mushrooms and the boulders and whatnot, the kind of living pantheistic nature around the Hearthlings.
Yeah.
Now that we have those NPCs, I definitely see a place for a conversation system down the line.
Yes, definitely.
Where charisma could play a role, and you could have little ability rolls when you're having the conversation with the NPC to see if you succeed in convincing it of.
And then building more long-term relations with the NPCs generally too.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely like to see like the Hearthling effectively leveling up his relationship to the world in the same way he levels up his own character sheet, so that his relationship to the world around him is as or maybe even more meaningful.
And on that note, we've also discussed such things as leveling up the NPCs as themselves too, effectively turning them into local deities in a way.
Exactly. Or just having them develop and exactly.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a development line that we can and probably will work more on at some point down the road. Yeah. Mr. Softner asks, goblins?
New race dogman.
New race dogman.
Goblins, good question, I guess. Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting design point, nevertheless, isn't it? Should Haven have goblins?
That's a good question.
I mean,
where do we draw the line? Like faggoty elves?
I mean, we have slimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
The thing I think we've discussed this previously, but we've been working along somewhat of a principle in that we want the overworld to look somewhat realistic, somewhat at least. Whereas
the underground, we take more liberties with.
Exactly. We take the limits further in more mystical places, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like underground places, obviously, are more mystical.
Yeah, I mean that should be self-explanatory, right? Yeah, but and I think there's also like Haven has built. I mean, Haven has always kind of been running on a premise of mild realism. But I think that it's also been running on a premise of like RPG tropes. Like
very much. I mean, I did see the comment about dragons earlier, and dragons obviously have been planned for a long time, and we want to have them. But I mean, our general principle is that when the fantastical things become commonplace, as they are in many other RPGs, they are no longer fantastical, and that sucks.
Yeah. I mean, for a dragon to be meaningful, it has to be a goddamn dragon. Like, it has to be, like, very special. Like,
It can't just be something you walk around in the world and find here and there.
hello, Skyrim. Looking at you.
One might argue that World of Warcraft has similar issues, perhaps.
But I kind of get it too. Like, I mean, if you run an MMO for like several years, you have, you know, power creep or whatever. Especially if you never reset the world.
Yeah, definitely.
And you know what can you know, if you introduce a dragon in the first, like, you know, 2 years of the game, then what are you going to do 10 years down the line?
Yeah,
well, it's just going to be a new dragon, right? There's an even more powerful dragon, like the, or even worse, like a flock of dragons, if you really want to go full return.
And that's, I guess it is true that part of the reasons we don't have dragons yet is just because we have wanted to avoid that problem.
I think there is a lot of space to be exhausted, and you know, design space to be exhausted in
Between rabbits and dragons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Between like the top animal we have now is like what, a mammoth, maybe mammoth probably.
Mammoth and trolls.
Yeah. Or maybe some of the dungeon creatures.
I mean, arguably we added trolls too early too, but yeah.
But trolls are at least kind of fun as well.
Yeah.
And there are lines of development there that we haven't explored either. Like, one of the plans I had envisioned originally for trolls was for them to be able to capture you in the mountain and whatnot.
Yeah, right, and tie you up and drag you into a cave and stuff.
Exactly,
Right,
and,
right.
and when you get your character back, like 3 months later, you become a changeling, and you know, it's all, So there were a lot of like more mystical threads. I mean, the dryads were an early implementation as well, which we have
certainly.
never taken further. Like, we implemented the dryads, and so what are they supposed to do?
Wasn't dryads actually the first animal we implemented whatsoever?
I think so. It was either
were
them or
sheep
the-
earlier? Were sheep earlier? Sheep
Here's what we had. We had we had sheep first, I think,
Yeah.
but they weren't animated. There were no animations for them. They were static objects.
Right.
So, because I hadn't drawn all the animation frames for
Right.
them, and then I think we implemented both dryads and cows before sheep actually made it back as a full implementation.
Well, I mean, depending on what you mean by full implementation, that is certainly true because domesticated animals was relatively late even, but...
Oh, sure, but I'm thinking in terms of the dev server. I mean, I remember remember there were those like flocks of
Yes,
sheep with like very
I'm not sure when we
suboptimal-
removed those, really.
We had.
I mean, we had never really added them. You could only create them by the god menu.
Sure. But they were there, and they had really suboptimal
Logic.
pack logic.
In several ways, yes. Yeah.
Those were the days, huh? Back
Weren't they?
What was that even? Like 2008, 9?
Yeah, 2008 certainly.
Yeah. It's more than 10 years ago.
Probably exactly 10 years ago,
Yeah.
more or less.
Pretty cool. Well, time flies when you're having fun.
Yep.
Let's see. Here we are, talking away, missing all the important questions.
Important questions.
Slime dungeon. Can you decrease the time for tower caps to grow?
Why though?
I think because he wants them to be more useful as
That's mine
support.
support. Yeah, but oh well.
International LoL player asks, any plans on fixing character development flying out of the hand? That's definitely
yes.
one of the projects we
Yes.
intend to look
Indeed.
at.
Present food being the by far the main problem, it seems.
Yeah, the big driver of the problems is the
Yes.
food system, with all the retarded food buffs and with the fact that you can drive hunger down.
I'm not sure if you saw that message about Oskupki.
Yeah, I saw it. Some guy eating
Oskupki for like 4,800 feps
per
apiece,
unit. It's a lot.
which is a multiplier of like 200 times.
That's about right.
So yeah, so yes, we do intend to do something about that at some point.
We're gonna look at that. But there's the question of choosing an opportune moment for when to do something about that.
Indeed. I mean, that's really one of those things that just, I mean, if we fix food now, then people will certainly complain about and arguably have a legitimate case that, they will never be able to catch up.
I'm not saying that fixing food implies a world reset, but but fixing food implies maybe it should imply a world reset.
Not sure. I mean, it's not like we couldn't
I think-
imagine nerfing people's values, but that's not a very nice thing to do either.
No, that's not how we go about things. I don't think we delete everything in that case. No, I think what realistically what would happen is like we would look to fix that. We would look to go through food, fix it in this world, to maybe like your satisfaction, and then at some point start perhaps preparing for a world reset. So, but that's down the line. Eustace Baggy says, food is not the problem. Beg to differ. Game needs some sort of adaptive stat cap.
Regardless of whether that is true, food is still a problem.
Yeah. And I also think that like I'm not apodictically opposed to a stat cap, and I think one of the interesting I think if you implement a meaningful food system that does not have these like retarded extremes, I think you have implemented a stat cap in some sense. Like if the marginal returns to eating are punishing enough, like then in some sense there is a stat cap, right?
Well, I mean, certainly you could argue that. This part about the stat cap and infinite development is certainly a big question that, there are many different opinions about that, for sure.
Yeah.
And we have very many different opinions ourselves, too.
Yeah.
But, I don't like the idea of a stat cap.
Seems a bit arbitrary. That being said, like I wouldn't be entirely opposed. I mean, it's kind of.
I know. I mean, it does have its aspects.
And I think it's kind of an RPG trope as well. Like,
Yeah, certainly. But I mean, the worst thing about it to me is that it feels like a cop out.
Sure, in lieu of an actually working system, or
Yes,
whatever.
indeed.
Sure.
It just feels like the cheap way out.
Yeah. H&H Granger says, as long as you have infinite growth in numbers, your attempts to balance the game will fail. I don't think that's true. I think, obviously the speed of growth matters.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's apodictically true that just because you have the potential for infinite growth, theoretically, that you actually have a problem. I think it's the speed, almost by definition, the speed has
That
to
being
matter.
said, I mean, it's not like we haven't had other ideas to even out the speed of growth for different groups of characters, so to speak. I'm not sure.
Deltas or
No, well, there's that too, but I'm not sure if we should talk about those things. But confluxes and stuff.
yeah, sure. Feel free to talk about that.
I'm not sure confluxes was really the thing we were talking about here, but I mean, one thing I'd consider generally is some kind of mechanic. I mean, don't take this literally, please, but consider the idea that for instance, crafting objects of a certain quality spreads an area buff over a wider part of the map that call it a civilization rating that increases the base quality of herbs and stuff in that area. In that way, people leveling up their own bases would automatically transfer quality buffs to people living around them and such things.
I think there's at least
In a way, bringing others up to their own
level of development.
Yeah.
I think there's at least the point to be made there that we are aware of the problem. I think we touched on this during the last stream that I did, was the problem of like herbs and fish falling terribly behind.
Exactly, never being meaningful in relationship to crops,
Exactly.
for instance, and that's where we arrived at this particular idea, I think.
Yeah. So, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed one way or another. Zeno Vyvern says, please fix satiations. We're gonna do something about them, not sure what, but
Fix satiations though? Why do you feel that satiations are the big issue that needs to be fixed?
Well,
to me, feasting is the main issue that needs to be fixed.
sure, but I think one of the problems is that they have drinks bringing their like buffs up to.
Yeah, certainly. If that's what he
25%,
means, then yes, definitely.
Well, I'm not sure.
Yes, definitely. If that was what he means, then I definitely agree.
Let's see. Other questions.
I think we had some thoughts about that too.
About what?
Satiations and drinks in particular, I guess.
Yeah, we've had some thoughts about it. Well, let's see. Also, Sheriff Berthedin says also questing needs to get nerfed as well. I think maybe charisma gain needs to be nerfed.
If anything,
in the first instance, I think the reason
I also think that quest score needs to be somewhat adjusted at least.
Sure.
There seem to be at least some objectives like artificing that is severely overvalued.
So there are some things there. Questing needs to be.
But yes, there probably needs to be some nerf to the charisma buffs to it as well.
But I think one of the big problems right now is that people have a metric fucked on of charisma.
Yeah, sure, and that goes back to food too.
Yeah,
certainly, definitely.
So I think a lot of the problems with the present game goes back to the food, and I think a lot of the problems then goes back to the fact that that hunger is never an issue.
Certainly true.
So
Certainly
that
true.
being said, I mean hunger is not easy to balance. I think a lot of people are probably happy right now with the situation that hunger doesn't matter, because that means that they can grind and play as much as they like.
Certainly.
If hunger mattered more, or if hunger were an actual limit to your development, you might be complaining about that instead. Like that might be,
Yeah, well, I guess that's a good question at least, but I mean, does that actually mean that we should remove hunger on the other hand?
It's a good question. Like one of the problems that we have, like balancing a game like this, is that you have the problem of like some people are gonna no life the game, some people are gonna no life the game from the start of the world to the end of the world. Those people are gonna get way ahead. Maybe stat cap could be a relevant point in that discussion. But my feeling with stat caps is that also that there's a very real risk I feel with stat caps if you introduce them, that you simply push the grind to new characters instead. Like when you hit peak whatever 999 in all values, you'd simply start roll a new character and start developing that instead. To be fair, I don't think we saw too much of that when we had stat caps, but we definitely did see a lot of people hitting the stat cap and then quitting playing.
Yeah, certainly.
And
I understand that. I probably do that too.
Yeah, I know I would. I mean, so, and that goes back to what kind of content can the game offer, like beyond the grinding, beyond the developing of stats, beyond the developing of your character and base. I think, I don't know, developing, feel free to have meaningful suggestions and inputs. Why do you play computer games? What do you want to see in computer games? Like ultimately, I think that boils down to very like philosophical questions.
Yeah,
why do you play computer games at all?
Certainly.
Like what do you want to accomplish? Because one thing that I've kind of noticed with myself, I don't know, I obviously play a lot of Paradox games like Europa Universalis or Victoria is one of my favorite games. I play a lot of those games, and like I kind of catch myself, thinking that like why am I playing this game? What am I doing? Like I'm just changing one digital state to another digital state that I for one reason or another prefer more. Like I'm just painting a map with the color of my nation, in that particular it's a grand strategy game. Like why am I doing this? I'm just changing this strange digital state for no apparent reason whatsoever, like for no ultimate end whatsoever. Like but I mean, there's a skill challenge in there, which can perhaps be like why do humans play? Why do humans play games? Why do we do this? It's a very human behavior, but why do we engage in that? Good question. I can't really say that I have the answer. I mean, some part of it is learning, I suppose. Like you learn things when you play. But yeah. Vlixion asks, would you ever sell Haven and Hearth to Ubisoft? To be fair,
wait a minute, who are Ubisoft again?
Some big AAA games company, I think.
Yeah, but I know I've played some of their games, but which are they?
Let's Wikipedia that shit right up.
They make me think of Blue Byte, but I know they're not.
No, they were Blue Byte.
Oh, I see. Oh, they weren't Blue Byte.
No, Blue Byte is a subsidiary of Ubisoft.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see.
It was acquired in 2001.
Oh, okay.
I like Blue Byte. That's Settlers
yes,
and
indeed.
whatnot.
Yeah, and 1492. I thought 1492 was made by Blue Byte actually, but Maybe they were late and that's why they bought both.
So
Not sure.
not sure.
But
Well-
they seem to be related to Blue Byte at least.
There's a huge, or at least a couple of paragraphs on lawsuits here. So. No, Assassin's Creed is one of their games.
Oh really? Huh, I think. Because that seems like a very different genre.
Myst, Prince of Persia.
Oh,
But I
Prince
mean,
of Persia, the original.
No, but I mean they're like a holding company.
Oh,
so
I see.
I mean they bought up a ton of like
Right.
intellectual property. So
Right.
I don't really know. Here we go. Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Just Dance, Prince of Persia, Rayman, Raving Rabbids, Tom Clancy's, Splinter Cell, and all the shitty Tom Clancy games. I hate Tom Clancy novels. Like if you read Tom Clancy novels, you're a bad person. Trash it, all of them.
So would we sell Haven to Ubisoft? Doubtful, I think.
I have to say that's doubtful. Then again, like I'm a greedy person, so it would obviously like if they gave me I don't know $1 billion, would you say no? Would you say?
I guess that would be difficult. I mean,
if they gave me $1 billion,
let's just say that I did prefer the situation we had with Paradox, where we gave them a similar game.
yeah,
I preferred that.
yeah. I wouldn't want to give them Haven. Like I'd be very like they would have to pay me a lot of money for Haven.
Yeah.
They would have to pay me more than Haven is worth.
Yes.
I'll put it that way.
Very definitely.
So I don't know.
So they probably wouldn't do that.
The Ubisoft, you call me, we talk about it, but I'll hear your offers, but the general answer I think is no. We're not looking to do that. I'll put it that way.
Indeed.
We're not building Haven in hopes of making an exit with all the monies.
That is definitely true.
No, but I mean, jokes aside, like Haven is definitely like I don't know a project with love and whatever, and was built on like I don't know shared vision or whatever of what could be a fun and meaningful computer game.
Mm-hmm.
And the persistence was a big thing of it.
Yeah.
Was a big deal. Like,
Definitely.
And the multiplayer aspect, like playing with your friends and whatnot.
Yep,
I think-
definitely. Which is why we haven't made any such things as shard or private servers, mind you.
Exactly. Ardennes TV still on the slime question. Isn't an easy solution to the slime concern the removal of the 5-second swap penalty in player versus monster combat, or just for the first seconds of combat?
Swap penalty? You mean switching weapons?
Yeah,
Because you
the
can't beat
problem
them
is that you're
without your Q500 sword because your miner doesn't have enough combat values.
No, but he begins with a pickaxe, obviously. Like
Yes, but you can't beat the slimes without a weapon. You need to switch to a weapon.
Yes, naturally. Like I switched to a weapon. I switched to my sword when fighting slimes.
Okay.
Like I wouldn't fight them with unarmed combat. I don't.
Yeah, except you wouldn't need to deal with the switch penalty.
Yeah, I mean I don't know. My thinking has been that the pickaxe should be a weapon.
Yeah, sure. I mean that's arguable in and of itself, I guess.
Yeah.
Wouldn't mind that.
Let's see.
That being said, melee combat should generally handle more weapon classes more gracefully, I think.
Expound on that point. What do you mean?
I mean, it seems we have some difficulty adding new weapons in a very meaningful way.
Sure. Adding
Which is the reason why we don't have more, battle hammers
yeah,
and
absolutely.
halberds and
Sure. There should be more differentiation in terms of what the weapons actually do, and I think there should also be crafting a weapon should be a much more involved process.
Yes.
Like right now,
Yes.
you just gather the materials and quick craft.
we have actually said the same things about some other specific things too, like buckets. It's a wee bit retarded that buckets, if you have 2 planks, then you have a bucket.
Yeah. Like Haven right now does not have a measure of complexity of crafting or whatever.
I mean, it's interesting that for all that is said about the deepness of crafting in Haven and Salem obviously being the crafting MMO, the crafting system itself is very simplistic.
Yeah, I mean you just gather the materials and quick craft.
Yeah.
That being said, I mean it doesn't mean nothing that the
No, obviously.
inputs are.
I mean, some people do praise Haven for its crafting deepness, and there's a reason for that. But nevertheless, there should be some other challenge to at least some crafting recipes that is not merely finding the ingredients.
30-second advertisement has a good point here. He says, I think the real glue that holds the crafting system together is glue. Every recipe should require glue.
That's a good point.
I can only get behind that. I can only support this man and what he said. I think he's onto something. Faux show. Let's go kill some ants.
One thing I've been thinking lately in terms of that is that some crafting recipes should actually, I mean, that's not a big change really, but some crafting recipes should require LP.
Yeah, that could be a thing. That could definitely be a thing. Ooh, there's a horse here. Let's get a piece of clover and let's get on the horse.
Glue for cupboards, of course.
Yeah, of course, glue for cupboards, definitely. I actually been thinking about like introducing another tier of cupboard or something to resolve that situation, because I think there's a very strong case to be made that the present cupboards are a little bit overpowered.
That's a good question. I think isn't one of the big reasons that they are so overpowered is because you can have them decayless in caves. Isn't that a big part of it?
Presumably.
I mean, if you actually had to go inside and outside of houses every
Sure.
time you need to deal with your cupboards.
Maybe. I mean, arguably there should be decaying caves.
Mm. If only for the reason of cupboards.
Yeah. Trellis for everything, says on up of the potted plant. That's also a thought, certainly.
Certainly. I mean, why? It only makes sense to grow wheat and trellises after all, because that's
Absolutely.
more tedium.
Yeah, and tedium is a feature, and also everyone loves the trelli. So.
Yes, that's what I've always heard, at least.
Yeah.
I've never heard anything to the contrary.
Nope. But haven't we been thinking, like, if we introduce multiple bounding boxes, that we could actually remove the movement bounding box for trelli?
That's not an idea I've heard, at least.
Okay, maybe that's just an idea that I've had and never actually run
Probably.
past.
That's not something I would spontaneously think reasonable. I mean, why would you walk through trelli?
Because they're so low, you could just step over them.
They don't look that low to me.
Well, I mean, suspension of disbelief.
I mean, that being said, I think it would be more meaningful to implement some kind of mass harvesting for trellises.
Sure, I think it's.
Trelli.
I mean, I understand that why people complain about them. It's a bit retarded that you have to like click all of them and
Yeah,
all that jazz.
exactly.
There are so many fireflies in this swamp. I will have a fortune.
I have been wondering if fireflies aren't a bit too common.
I don't know. I think it depends a bit on your region.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we did have that discussion, yes.
Ownip of the potted plant says cupboards are overpowered because all the other containers are trash and have crazy material requirements. Some point.
It's not as if there aren't some points to be made there. That's true. But nevertheless, I mean, still, if you really only could have cupboards indoors,
Yeah.
surely they would be less overpowered by far.
No, of course. Yeah, true. So.
Wasn't that actually the way we did it in Salem, that you couldn't even carry cupboards outside? And then we changed it back in Haven because we wanted to be more lenient and fun. Always a mistake, always a mistake.
I can't imagine how would that even work. Like you couldn't bring the cupboards outside.
You couldn't right-click the door when carrying. When carrying them.
You think so?
That's how I recall it, at least.
If you say so. Cupboards are the reward of spending your points for yeomanry and building a dwelling. Yeah, there's some point to be made there.
Yeah, there is.
There's some point to be made there.
I mean, still though, I mean, when I see the guys and they have, minimaps upon minimaps of cupboards in their caves, that's where cupboards are overpowered, I think.
Yeah. Yep. I have to agree with that. See, let's see the other questions here.
Replicant 8 asks, any plans on the new dungeon? Oh, here's a friendly
That's always exciting.
Princess Mandy is here.
What does he mean by thoughts on a new dungeon? Does he refer to thoughts on bat caves or thoughts on a dungeon following bat caves?
I think he expects or asks for, oh, look, we got troll mushrooms. We got a pot full of troll mushrooms. That's very kind of you, Princess Mandy. So I'll give you... Herp, 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 herp.
How is clapping these days? Is it as retarded as it always was? Or
Probably
is it
cancer. That's fine. Alright, you can bandy now. That's a new feature. I like that.
Right.
Here, you get a firefly, Princess Bandy, if you want it. Yeah, I'm bleeding. I have some leeches on. I'm just gonna work back with these wonderful troll shrooms that I was given. See if Princess Mandy gives me something here. Ooh, I got 50 coins of gold.
Oh, did he just commit a crime to do that?
No, I'm bleeding from leeches.
Okay.
So there's that. And he has the Faw Dev suck sign.
Oh, right.
He made one himself. Mr. Softener says, come to community fair. We'll definitely go to the community fair
Okay.
down the road. I don't want to go there just... Ardance TV says, would it be feasible to add animal tracking based on perception exploration that would work similar to orb prospecting and direct you in the general direction of the animal you seek? As it works already, you do have a perception exploration roll on seeing the bleeding stains left by animals that you've shot.
Exactly. I think what he means is finding a certain type of animal before he actually sees one, though.
I realize as much, and that's not something that's like easily or with any like obvious method implemented in.
Indeed.
I mean, animals in Haven right now are very transient things.
Yes.
They are created when players look at maps and
removed
unload
shortly thereafter.
Exactly, they unload with the map, so they're very transient. So there's no way, for example, like if you're in one map grid to like lead you to an animal, or at least, I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't be done. I mean, anything is possible, I suppose, but there's no system for that right now, at least.
Indeed.
I'm kind of like, how meaningful would this really be?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I'm not.
I mean, for that matter, is the idea really that you should be able to find as many bears as you want?
Arguably not, right? Like, arguably finding a bear should, to some extent, be a happy coincidence, because I assume that it is. That being said, I kind of could see the point that you could, maybe tell the game that you're out looking for something and make that more of an explicit mechanic somehow. Like, I'm tracking bear, I'm looking for bear tracks or whatever. Like we had some similar things with herbs in Salem, like you had those walk modes where you walked slower and that increased your chances of finding herbs and nonsense like that.
Right.
So,
I mean, that being said, one could perhaps also imagine some kind of mechanic. Oh yeah, good question. Yeah.
we're not super enthusiastic.
I mean, that being said, it might at least be worth exploring the idea that animals actually are persistent and that there's some kind of Gaia simulation going on.
Absolutely. Like, I definitely, at least abstractly, I think animal populations could be more persistent. Like in terms of like hunting down the local bear population.
If one might at least say that if animals were persistent, if actual animals were persistent, then it would probably be fun if they left tracks.
Yep. I mean, it would be fun if you could find like bear tracks and track them. That could be fun, I suppose.
That's. I mean, that also raises the question. I mean, to what fullness you would want the game to simulate animals that aren't currently being tracked by players, so to speak, seen by players. I mean, if it were to have to emulate a million animals all the time, then that would certainly increase the server requirements.
Yeah.
I'm not sure to what extent that's worth it. Not sure.
So there's your answer.
just mean with a parallelized server, that could at least be more feasible.
Ike Dragon asks, if Haven had a different theme rather than Slavic and Germanic myth and legend, what would it be? Well, we tried
Okay.
Settlers in the New World was
And then-
one premise we tried.
At one time.
It
And
was-
I didn't hate that theme, mind you.
No, I didn't hate that theme either. I think it was a great theme.
Mhm.
I think a lot of the thematic work for Salem was actually awesome.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I did. It was not too long ago that I actually logged into Salem and went and walked around for a bit, and where there were many of the thematic aspects of it that I liked,
Yeah.
like the eternal Indian summer and the autumn theme and stuff.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that.
Word up.
That being said,
Yeah,
though, I mean,
and-
that being said, many of these themes are to some extent intrinsically limited in their scope. I mean, with an eternal Indian summer, you can't have seasons, and obviously you want seasons for Haven.
Sure. Sure. I don't know, but I wouldn't. I don't know. I suppose you could do like Mars colonization, or Haven in space. I
Yeah,
suppose you
we
could do
talked about that too. I mean, one of the real issues we encountered when doing Salem, mind you, is that it was very difficult for us to make it meaningfully different from Haven.
Yeah, and
There were many choices we made that we felt were suboptimal just to make it different from Haven,
because we
like the
wanna do the
thing with
same
cave
thing.
levels.
Yeah. Where we felt like having cave levels would objectively be better, but we don't want to have cave levels because
That would just make it more Haven.
that would just make it the same game.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to make the same game, we wanted to make a different game.
And I think, unless we pick some really alien theme like Haven in space,
Yeah.
that would still be a very real problem for any theme.
Arguably so. Yeah, I've actually at one point considered like a Pacific Islander theme for a similar game,
Right.
like colonizing Pacific Islands, Easter
Right.
Island mythology
Yeah.
type stuff. Could be fun, but again, I don't see us building the same game for what would that be even be the fourth time or whatever. Like I think this is the final iteration of the game. Wherever we bring it, I don't think we'd start over again.
Probably not. Probably not.
I mean, if we were to, I'm not saying we couldn't build another game, but I would probably
Mhm.
want to build another game at that point.
Yeah, and
like for starters, I wouldn't want to build another MMO. I would build a single player game at that point.
Yeah, that's a good argument too. But I mean, one thing we have discussed from time to time would be building an actual MMO RTS instead.
Sure, that could be fun.
Yeah, that could certainly be fun.
That could certainly be fun. Like building an RTS MMO kind of like, and I think there could definitely be a case for like an MMO-ish game with like a much shorter like game cycle or whatever, like where it's more focused on like just the combat, just getting into the combat or whatever. Like the I think that's kind of a theme that like Argario and those games play off.
Yeah, and wasn't there something called Troll Island? It also seemed
Yeah.
slightly similar.
May have been similar. I think Troll Island wasn't that originally a World of War or Warcraft 3 mod. I
Yeah,
think.
may very well be.
But there was also. Do you remember that game we played with? You had like a Viking and you had you
No,
were
right,
running
what
around
was that
chopping
called
with an
again?
axe. I don't remember what it was called, but it was like mildly fun.
And it's an interesting idea. Both it and Agario are interesting. I think. I mean, it's also true that
I really liked Agario. I thought it was a great game.
Yeah, I mean it's a great game, but also I mean it stops growing on you after a while.
Sure. I mean, but doesn't anything like?
Yeah, sure, but the thing just being that it seems like there's some kind of ceiling to how much you will want to play Agario,
Sure.
because it doesn't seem you have to do all that much because you've seen it all and done it all. And I felt a bit the same for this Viking game too.
Yeah.
That once you played a few matches, haven't you done that?
Sure. Yeah, exactly. You kind of exhausted the game. Sure. You probably want something a little bit deeper then. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have the perfect idea in my head right now.
And yeah, certainly.
But yeah, so I don't think we'd build another permanent world crafting game just the same way as Haven all over again without at least some new core idea to make it meaningfully different or whatever.
I think one idea we've discussed at some point, I'm not sure if that's something we would actually want to do, mind you, but one idea we've discussed at some point is that if Haven really strikes at large, like really, and everyone in the world wants to play it, then I think we've discussed the idea that it might be fun to do localized versions of it, like a special version for China,
Sure.
which is based on Chinese mythology
Sure,
instead.
that could be fun. Like,
And then that might even be fun to do.
absolutely.
But,
If we had like multiple dev teams per
Yeah.
iteration, sure, that could be great fun.
Something like that, yes.
Absolutely. I'm not holding my breath, but like, obviously I realize that this will happen at some point, but obviously we're gonna get there. Let's see, is this the community fair one? I think so. Good, then we know. I'll mark it on the map. I don't want to go there just yet. I want to go there. Oh, someone killed a mammoth. Walking around with a mammoth.
Mhm.
Only reasonable after all that you can walk around with a mammoth.
Actually, it's riding around with a mammoth, mind you.
Sure. Let's make a mark. X marks the spot here for Community Fair Road. The Fair Road. Boom.
Oh, did we actually just lose webs
So thank you.
in this one? Snap, gotcha.
Nope. Got nothing. Alright, I got something. There we go. Reconnection successful. Are we back? Are we back? Are we back? There we go. See here.
Oh, so OBS connected?
Yeah. Still
Okay.
streaming, still recording. Still. Welcome to the chat room. Can you see us? Can you hear us? Are we on? Please confirm in the chat if so. Live. It says we're live. Stream is back.
Oh, yeah.
There we go.
Great. I feel this happened last time I was on stream too.
Something about your influence on your negative influence on the auras. You're the tech auras. All right. Can you hear us? You can hear us. Yes. Awesome. Great. We're back. Sorry about that little hiccup. Seems I have a problem with the motherboard on the routing computer here, right?
Yeah, it's something like that. Very unclear what the issue actually is, but sometimes it
drops
just,
connection intermittently.
sometimes Nix just loses the Nix.
Yeah. So where were we? Like, Dakin asks, what is your favorite lab-based genetic modification? Thoughts on genetic modification? Howdy.
Well, I must admit I haven't really been looking at lists of lab-based genetic modifications.
No. I don't know. I have to admit that I'm kind of skeptical of genetic modification in general.
And
I think it seems like, I don't know, playing God with stuff. I realize that me saying that isn't going to stop anyone from doing it or
Indeed.
whatever, but I'm skeptical. I kind of failed to see the purpose. I think you can grow more than enough food to feed yourself with the existing organisms that God has placed on the planet, and I don't see any particular reason to excessively modify them and expect good results from that.
And particularly as long as there are patent and copyright issues regarded.
Word up. It's
there
just
with-
basically
there's
that's just a way of putting you on the corporate grid.
Yeah.
So I
so
mean,
no thanks.
yeah, I mean, I'm not, I live on the internet, so a lot of this is just internet information. I don't know how true it is, but my understanding is that Monsanto has some really, for example, Monsanto has some really like odious business practices in terms of like
suing farmers for their fields having been contaminated with Monsanto patented shitty corn genes, whatever, and that just seems to me like an obvious like abuse of patent law.
Yeah, and likewise, it's it's established practice that farmers have to buy new.
Yeah, exactly. They can't save seed and blah blah blah, and I think that's just retarded, and it just goes back to like the world state wanting perfect control of the food supply.
Not to mention that the constant argument for genetic modification isn't then finally we will be able to feed everyone.
Yeah, exactly. When the problem with feeding people is always like socialism. Like there's never any real lack of food. It's always socialism causing the problem, or like government interventions of one form or another.
So that's that.
So we have that question solved. Now you know how we feel about it. I don't think. Is there anyone who feels differently about this? Like any actual person beyond like the corporate?
Yes, of course. I mean,
Gnomes?
we will finally be able to feed everyone. I mean,
It shall be glorious.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. So Jordan Colsey asks, how do trolls stick around while other animals don't? I guess since trolls don't despawn, there's potential for world bosses like dragons, for example, that roam large areas.
Yeah, I mean, and generally speaking, animals don't have to despawn.
Yeah,
That's
there's
not,
nothing intrinsic about animals that that they have to despawn. It's
That's just how
we've
animals
done it.
work.
Yeah. And the reason for that is like there are reasons like.
I mean, that being said, though, there are issues with this. I mean, as I'm sure everyone knows, parts of the map are loaded and unloaded on demand, and when they're unloaded, nothing on them is simulated.
Yeah.
Which is problematic in terms of emulating exact animal behavior and stuff.
Yeah, I mean the animal would be where it was when you unloaded.
Yeah, unless there's some separate mechanic for extrapolating
teleport it around or whatever, like. Yeah, and then that would be a whole like meaningless mechanic just to simulate that behavior then, which wouldn't be an accurate representation of what would have happened had the map been loaded anyways. So you're really kind of creating problems for yourself that I think seem fairly unnecessary, especially when the reason trolls are persistent is because it matters. Like they matter, they are relevant creatures. We didn't want it to be that you popped a troll and then could just leave your dungeon or just leave your cave and wait for the troll to despawn. We wanted it to be a more persistent problem for you. Like you had to actually deal with the troll if you wanted to use that mine shaft or whatever. So there has to be some reason for the persistence. I think like most people won't be able to differentiate between two boars anyway. So why not have them despawn? No reason. So but I mean I wouldn't be opposed to world bosses at all. I think that's a great idea.
Definitely.
Like,
I mean again, it's not that we don't want dragons.
No, exactly. And I think like even apart from dragons, I think just a battle scarred boar or whatever, like or a boar demon god like in Princess, what's it called?
Yes, that one.
Exactly, by Miyazaki. Like a demon boar could be fun. Like I think albino versions were suggested at some point, like for the animals to.
Well, yes, I mean we need the white boars, don't we? I mean we need the red and blue boars too, surely.
Red, blue, boars, what are you
just
talking about?
Color variations.
right, sure. That's the RPG trope there.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. We need the green slime, the blue slime, the red slime, the white boar, the red boar, absolutely. A holla. I can totally get behind that.
Let's damage animals with catapults. Yeah, so that you can deal with your trolls even easier than you currently can. Great idea. I have no objections.
I wouldn't actually mind. I think.
No, perhaps, but again, do trolls really need to be easier to deal with?
I don't know how you're shooting a catapult in. Like,
yeah,
a cave.
sure. I mean, sure. I guess we
Anyway.
can disable catapults in caves. Perhaps I wouldn't mind that. But then again, you could also argue that that it is strange that you can build stone towers in caves too.
It absolutely is kind of strange that you can build stone towers in caves. It's also kind of strange that you can keep your smelters running 24/7 down in the mine without having any ventilation or any anything. but
That is true.
that is.
And all of that should of course be remedied in due time,
Absolutely.
because tedium is a feature.
Yeah, that's what Philip always says. I cannot fit this rabbit in my inventory, so that's a shame. But I can probably do it now if I catch the rabbity again.
Should it be possible to right click and drag and P on things with things on your cursor?
Huh? One more time?
Should it be possible to wring the rabbit's neck when you have it on your cursor?
Should it be, or are you saying that should be a mechanical change to make it so? I don't think it is.
Yeah. And should we change it so that that is possible?
Maybe if you have a good UI for it.
Well, I mean, there's nothing different about the flower menu being used there.
Well, would I just hold it and right click then? Or what?
Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't mind that. That could be fun, or that could probably work at least. Oh no! Oh god damn it! Oh, I'm terrible at this. Why am I clicking? Okay. Right. Noob. Let's jump home and stash all this junk.
Shame.
Faux show. So let's see. Well, yep.
In your excuse, you were talking at the same time.
Yeah. Zenti69 says, "Lol, look at that sexy white cardigan at Bruderborn and wearing its Sunday best for the stream. You better believe it, boy. Like, it comes on for you only, for your eyes only." Yeah, I'd best believe it. Yep. Please nerf caves. No, I don't want to nerf caves.
Nerf caves? What does that even mean?
I don't know. I think he wants the caves to be easier, maybe.
He could also mean that they should be nerfed in terms of quality of their produce.
Sure.
Who knows?
You're always open to the alternative implementation or interpretation, right? I don't know what he means, so nerf everything. Haven and Hearth dating sim when? Is there any feature you lack for this to be a dating sim? Like, couldn't it be already? Like, you could advertise on the forums. And I see no reason why it couldn't be already. Nerf community fair, please. Like, that's actually an interesting discussion.
Yeah, we have had this discussion too. I mean, it's you had some local trading post near close to you.
Yeah.
Like
I used to trade at
Turnip.
I used to trade at a place called Moss Turnip, and did we lose client or the internet again?
No, it's not annoying damage.
I don't. No webs here. Oh, now I do. Okay.
It's not alone.
Here we go. Let's see. Nerf community fair. Derek denial of service. He was joking that we said Nerf community fair and were immediately hacked down to it. So, are we back?
No.
No, we are not.
Check OBS.
Says we're streaming.
Okay.
Why can't I ask it to try to reconnect? It's not uploading right now. There we go. Reconnection successful. Wow, I got a dead golden eagle.
Oh wow.
Wow.
What quality?
Quality 120. Okay, we're back. Sorry about the persistence issues tonight.
restate what you said about nerfing community fair. You crashed.
Yeah, where were we? I mean, it kind of sucks that the larger trading posts don't really seem to leave any meaningful space for lesser ones.
Exactly. So I used to be trading at a place called Moss Turnip that I believe isn't around anymore. I think their charter stone has stopped responding, so I don't think I can teleport there anymore at least.
But that was before you discovered the community fair.
That was before I found my way to the community fair. And okay, so any clapping, sir, gets you kicked. So suppose you are aware of that. So take his horse and run with us.
He's back.
Yeah, so basically once I found the community fair, there was no longer any need to use the local trading stations.
And that kind of sucks.
And that kind of sucks, yes. I'm not sure what to do about it, however.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, there may potentially be some kind of case to be made to make distance more meaningful in Charterstone usage.
Arguably, but still, it's hard to see how you would make it so meaningful that you wouldn't go to the best market or whatever.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, everyone still would bring their produce to the best market, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Remove Charterstones?
Yep, absolutely. Remove Charterstones, roads, no fast travel.
Yep.
That's the solution for sure.
I think so.
Yeah, I don't know.
That would definitely nerf the community fair, though.
That is true. Also remove the visitor debuff, I suppose. Would also nerf the community fair significantly. So there's certainly
there are ways we can do about that.
There are options. But I don't think I can actually think of any good options for how to go about actually nerfing the community fair. Because at the end of the day, I have to see it as a boon that people can, with relative ease, connect and meet up in the game. And
well, I mean, consider the idea that the further away something is, the more seldom you can use Charterstone to go there. You can only go to the community fair once a month, but most turning points a week. Of course, you just have a chain of 5 volts.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It seems like you find ways around that, I think. It's and if you make it per road or whatever, then you just build 5 roads to still have the ability to go. No, I don't know. I have to see it as a boon and as a good thing that you can actually meet up with friends and play the game in an MMO fashion. I think we tried the alternative there and it didn't work out too well.
Mm-hmm. But it still sucks a bit, though.
Yeah, it does. I would certainly love it if... I don't know, maybe if trade was a more differentiated thing to begin with, there would be more room for alternative places. Perhaps. If trading goods were more meaningful or more meaningfully differentiated.
I guess.
Somehow.
I guess. There may be a case to be made for sure. Admittedly.
Let's see, any other questions? Delquaz says, by nerf caves, I mean the caves are not realistic at all. Some activities should not be able to take place inside a cave. Same goes for buildings, towers, windmills, and other tall buildings.
Oh, that kind of nerf. Okay, well, if we are on that subject, then there are actions that should not be possible to be mounted either.
Sure. I don't know. I think. I mean, some things are a bit retarded, like building a windmill in a cave and whatever. That is a bit strange. Now, I think the reason why we haven't removed that is for reasons of fun, quite simply.
Yeah, quite simply.
We have left that in because we kind of figured it's fun to be able to, just build and dick around with building a, strange underground base.
That being said, it could perhaps be conceivable to simply replace them with some very similar alternative, just aesthetically different. I mean, say that instead of a stone tower, you have a 5-level basement.
Sure.
Could be an option.
And I think, we could perhaps remove, windmills. Maybe underground windmills is a bit much.
Yeah.
It's a bit too much fun.
I might be in agreement on that.
Fokan says the Moss Turnip guys were wonderful. Love trading with them. Yeah, me too, man. Like they had a great place going. They had like a nice little kiln that was better quality than what I had at the time, at least. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, local trading posts like that they are a nice thing.
Yeah, it was.
Quite
It was
simply.
a lot of
And
fun.
it does suck that they aren't more viable.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun when I discovered it as well, because it was definitely a leap up for me in terms of the quality of my gear when I started trading with them.
Mm-hmm.
I think ultimately what I want to do here is get enough bone to make a study bench. I think would be nice, so that I can make them. Let's go dig some clay. No, I'm not going to spar you. I think you have better stuff than I do. H&H Granger asks, when will the civilization effect on wildlife return? Not that it matters with current roads, as you can port everywhere instantly without penalty. Salty?
North roads.
Yeah, North roads.
Civilization effect on wildlife.
Yeah,
Right. That thing. Good question. I'm somewhat skeptical of that idea, to be honest. I don't think that was a great idea in itself. That being said,
I mean, the implementation was always terrible because it was completely counterintuitive. Like you wanted the place to be noobish and deserted, basically. Like if you built a base there, you dropped your civilization.
That being said, I mean there is some underlying idea there that I still like and think should be in the game. I mean, some kind of differentiation between players in terms of how horrible they are.
Sure.
And I kind of, I never really experienced it myself, but I kind of think we had a semi-good thing going there in Salem, didn't we?
Yeah.
With the darkness and its temper drain and stuff, and how you could build a church to make yourself a local bubble in it. And
definitely, I think it could definitely be used also to.
And I also liked it thematically how it got darker
Sure.
as you ventured into it.
I think it could be like if you had a system for that in one way or another, you could use it to kind of change the topography of the map, or topology rather.
Yeah, I've also considered adding weather-like or drug-like effects to that. Like one little thing I consider is making it so that all trees lean in toward you,
We discussed that before.
or whatever. Or perhaps making the screen slightly grayer and darker and something. Not sure, but something like that would be nice. Of course, however, it would suck if people moved in and it's a big village there and it's still supposed to be grimy.
Yeah, exactly. You would have to be able to remove it. Let's see. Notice me finally. I'm gonna notice you, Amanlu. Senpai notices you. Maybe some masks that counter Kohler's cough. I run around with 100 out of 500 HP, with most HP damage being Kohler's cough. Getting 24 to 25 HP damage too often. I mean, after mining like 100 to 200 gold.
How did we make Kohler's cough in? Did it get worse over time?
I think it gets worse. I don't remember. It was something like that.
Something like that.
There was some effect like that. I think the reason was that you were supposed to stop at some point. Like it was relatively easy to get rid of if you stopped.
Right. As long as you heal it, it's not as bad. That was perhaps the issue. Yes, I seem to recall something like that. Yes.
So yeah, maybe a counter for Kohler's cough could be. I know DDD9, or whatever his name is, called it actual cancer, which I thought was funny.
Speaking of which,
exactly, like enough points of Kohler's cough would obviously split off a cancer.
Well, I mean, I imagine it like it might work more like cancer in real life. I mean, you just get it randomly one day.
Exactly. Not necessarily through any fault of your own. Like suddenly you just have the plague and you die. Start bleeding from every orifice in your body, and
I mean, Haven is supposed to be semi-realistic.
It's realistic after all. Mr. Softman says regional exclusivity. You can get almost everything in any part of the world. Makes trading hubs hard to do. Yeah, I mean, sure. Is he gonna attack me now for real?
Yeah.
Is he gonna attack me now for real? Like he's actually trying to hit me. Get kicked, boy. Do we have the smite command still?
I'm not sure actually if we ever implemented that in
Or,
Haven.
or
You do
is
have
my
the Hadouken.
character
You do
prevented
have,
from using it?
you do have the Hadouken.
So just the command Hadouken then?
I call an act Hadou, I think. Right. With a U, I think.
You.
At the end of the, yeah. No. It's called, yeah. No, it's actually called Hadouken.
Let's see. Zenit69 says, how did you drag Loftar away from his busy gangster life of women, drugs, and partying to join us tonight?
Well, you know, I guess going back to it after this anyway.
Well, I mean, that's what exactly. So after this, it's just hookers and blow all night, right?
As always.
As always. As every night. Every day I'm hustling. Every day I'm hustling. Every day I'm we blowing money fast in this job. I played some Rick Ross.
That's enough.
Played some Rick Ross for Frederick a couple of times. Always a success. So
Highly popular.
Yeah, you win every time you so I got a badger here. Someone was kind enough to leave me a badger. Have you gotten any badgers recently, Frederick?
No, I can't say I have.
You can't say you have. That must mean that I'm the more popular developer. See, let's just stash all this nonsense and let's head to the community fair after that. Can we signatures or crafting trails on crafting items, like swords and bows, like memories of pain? I think he wants like some marker that he
exactly,
made some item or other.
What we actually discussed last week.
Yeah.
And the conclusion of that discussion is that I mean, are you just supposed to right click and then add a signature? Should it really be that easy?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't at all be opposed to making some system or other.
I mean, it would definitely be very easy to implement.
Yeah. But I also kind of don't want people writing things on every goddamn item in the world. Or maybe I do. Maybe it could be fun, like when you fish nonsense off
Yes.
people have written stuff
Yes.
on it. Jordan Cozy
Seems
says,
to devalue parchments though.
this axe was made by 420 Deck Eater 6969.
Couldn't see that happening.
Nope, for sure not. That's actually not the horse I left.
Mm.
Shit. Vixion asks, how come the player base is so small? I don't know. Like,
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, don't ask me
No,
the way everyone is
I just
playing.
worked through it.
I was assuming we would have made our Chinese localized variant already.
Word up. There should have been a blockbuster game years ago, I feel. So I don't know why the player base is so small, actually.
You tell me.
You tell me, truth be told. Maybe it's a niche game. I don't know. I have no answers. Like, I don't necessarily think it would have to be a niche game, even. I don't necessarily think that Haven is a niche game.
No, I'm not necessarily sure, certainly.
I could certainly see there being a market for a bigger. So I don't know. Ardennes TV says, slime's a liquid that can be stored in barrels.
Well, I mean, the idea surely was to make it so that stockpiles rather respawned into actual slimes.
Truly. Scuzzy says it's too brutal for casuals and combat is ridiculous. Is it even that brutal these days?
Yeah, I mean, really, how often do you get killed?
Yeah. Have you ever died? Like, how often do you have to die? Like, if you don't want to die, you don't die, right? Like, it's pretty.
That's my
easy.
impression. I mean, especially with the current death mechanics, it's pretty much impossible to die.
That's my feeling. So no, I don't think that's it.
That being said, I guess it might be difficult to stream Haven, for example, if you aren't a developer.
Oh,
at least.
surely you'd get killed if you did.
No.
Delquaz says, I think eating should be a need, not something that you do only to get stats, and starving yourself should have some
Yeah,
consequences.
I mean, more eating is always good.
Yeah, exactly. Feeding is a feature after all. No, I don't think eating should be a need. I don't think there should be needs at all, really.
If you recall, it was technically speaking a need in Legacy.
Technically speaking, I suppose it's still a need, right? I mean,
No, you don't need to eat. Yeah,
Well, if you
right.
burn
Well,
energy.
sure. Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, sure. So there's a need already.
exactly. See where we end up.
That being said, I do not think that it should not entail the stats.
No, I
increases.
mean, no, I think that's one of the best mechanics Haven
Yeah,
has.
certainly. I mean, apart from the current complete disbalance in terms of
Absolutely.
food, but
Absolutely.
apart from that, I think food is one of the best working systems.
Yep. Apart from the fact that it doesn't work at all, I think
Yeah.
it's great.
But it's always been one of the most fun systems, I
Yeah.
think.
And I think it's also the only reason why why there's differentiation in food is because of the leveling system. The only reason why there's any reason to grow, different things or anything at all for that matter is the leveling system.
Mhm.
So food being just a need doesn't really
Make a lot of sense.
make any sense at all. Why is swimming such a dangerous task? Swimming is
Is
not, is it?
I mean, are we speaking 2009 now?
Exactly. Swimming-
2009 called and wanted that swimming back.
Exactly. Swimming used to be mildly dangerous. Now swimming is. I mean, you can't even. Swimming is nothing. Get him. Are you gonna get me? I'm right here. Come at me, bro. So at the community fair again. See if we can round up a nice little band of merry men gallivanting through the community fair with.
New noobish experiences in the wild this time.
Was that a question or what?
No, it was a question from me.
What was the question?
Well, I mean, usually when you stream, you have some new experiences in the noobish wildlands, which prompt you to do some changes to the game. But
Are you asking? Have I had any tonight?
yes,
I don't know. Have you noticed anything? I haven't really been
That's what I meant.
focusing on what I've been
Yeah,
doing.
I
truth be told.
almost,
I've been focusing on the
kind of
conversation.
figured.
I haven't really been paying much attention to it. See if they're selling anything. I'm sure they're selling lots of things. Bandy, you can bandy with me, sir. I got a Dev Suck battle sound. I don't want
with memories of pain.
I'm gonna pick it up and drop it on the ground.
And step on it.
Block him. You can't block me. See. Jordan Kosi says, since you're doing monthly streams, can you take a bit of dev time to make a lightning bolt smite animation for when you kill people who attack you?
We have the Hadoken.
And that knocks people out?
Yes.
Or-
Act Hadoken. With OU. But it's still strange in that, yes. But it's still strange in that you need a combat relation to use it.
I got a fair, brilliant emerald. Ooh, thank you. Thank you, sir. Now they have me blocked. What ever will I do?
Memories of pain on everything. All the memories of pain.
So many memories of pain. All those memories of pain. Lost forever like tears of me. Chickens should fight and be killable with new characters. I think at least roosters should fight.
Yes, certainly.
Cocks
Cocks should definitely fight.
should definitely be fighting.
Chicks, and hen should definitely at least run away.
Yeah. I think there are probably like many animals that should have just in general, a better logic for just staying away from players.
Mm-hmm.
Like, deer, for example, I think should be far more skittish than they are.
Not only that, they should actually have some kind of pack logic too. I love how it is that you find in a new flock of deer and they always scatter.
Exactly, like they, zero cohesion, zero, not even any intent of holding together the flock.
Ooh, a piece of heart. How much is that?
How much was it? 400 golden quills. Can probably afford that, I think. No, I cannot. Sorry, cannot.
That's not too bad though.
No. But I mean, I guess the beaver dungeons are
certainly
fairly plenty.
It's fine.
Here you can buy a sub token. See what that costs. Oh, you can.
Ooh, quality 840.
You need 10 carrots, quality 840. That's specific.
It really is.
Some pearls. Quality 14, quality 67, quality 37. It's interesting. And I think pearls are one of the better mechanics. I think I like pearls in the sense that noobs can find pearls and have use for them and trade them away for profit. And
I wonder how well pearls are actually working now, to what extent they are being bought and stuff.
Good question. Tell us, chat.
I mean, I've certainly seen macros on streams for picking all the muscles in an area and stuff.
Sure. Zunzon asks, did you kill that guy that attacked you in the forest or just teleport away? I actually just kicked him from the game.
Yes.
So he can log right back in. Our Dynasty TV asks, what is the current Pearl percentage chance? In my experience, it's no longer the 1% it used to be. No, it's not. It's we're not going to reveal the mechanics.
No, of course you aren't, but I still don't actually remember how it works right now. I mean, it's not Fatal any longer, is it?
No, I don't think so. Manny13 asks, how about Kite Shield and Crusader Helmet? Deus Vult. I wouldn't mind. I mean, the problem, I suppose, is finding the niche for
exactly.
How is it different from a round shield?
And the Dragon Hell.
I mean, with the shield, it's arguably just better armor or whatever. But
sure.
So there's no real reason why we couldn't make the shield. But helmets are a bit difficult, or a tad bit difficult to differentiate meaningfully. How many can you actually implement? How many different helmets? I mean, it always seems like when we implement a new helmet with a higher armor rating, all other helmets are suddenly
lost.
Yeah, exactly. All other helmets are suddenly worthless, which is a bit unfortunate.
I mean, I guess it goes back to the fact that to the point we've been discussing lately, that it's hard to find meaningful rewards to give out in many cases.
Yeah. I think a lot of one of the things that we've been discussing when implementing new mechanics, like dungeons, for example, is we would like to be able to give players better and more differentiated and varying rewards for accomplishing tasks in game. But kind of the problem is that everything always boils down to stats.
Yeah.
To the basic stats.
Yeah.
And we did some interesting things we've done with Greedos, for example, which has given us at least one new vector to reward players in perhaps a somewhat more qualitative way. But I think there's a general problem there which still kind of persists. I'm not entirely sure what to do about that.
Indeed.
It would be fun to have more, rewards of kinds. Cold Stance asks, would it be possible to implement writable domestically crossbred wargs?
Wargs, you say?
I think aren't those the wolves in Lord of the Rings, aren't they called wargs?
Was there something to that effect? Where?
I don't know. Let's
assume it means wolves.
Exactly. A writable wolf could be fun, right? A writable anything could be fun. I think mammoths are the first priority. Rideable mammoths should definitely happen. Like mammoth with howdaws and stuff on top.
You mean elephants?
Exactly, elephants. Elephants should happen. Dance, my horsey. That's funny. Let's see, we're coming up on the 2-hour mark here, so we're gonna call it a night soon. And I'm very grateful to everyone who participated. If you have any final questions, feel free to throw them at us. We're here at the community fair, one of the biggest. Oh, there's this idiot. I should probably be a bit careful. With what I delete. No worries, nothing happened. My name Biggie says thank you for creating this game. You're welcome. Thank you for playing it. Thank you for enjoying it and having fun with it. And thank you for being on tonight and asking us questions and all that. Mammoth Cheese says Ozone Parrot. I think that's actually one of the mechanics that I like most about Skyrim, was the fact that the giants there were herding mammoths and making mammoth cheese. I thought that was actually believable and
Neat.
It's fun. Neat. Do you have plans, asks Mandyland 5, for Old Haven? Not really, right?
Yeah, keep me at running. That's the plan.
Oh, no, I don't continue.
No.
Oh, God damn it.
Of course.
Hopefully he logs in again. He's obviously been waiting for me. He's logging. Oh, but he's on my claim, so he can't log in.
Too bad.
That's a shame. Amanda H&H says, thanks for the stream. Interesting as always. By the way, there are games at Community Fair after the stream. You should stay and watch. Maybe participate. Maybe?
Maybe.
Maybe I should. Plans for Old Haven? Not really, no.
I can't imagine that. I mean, it's
a wonderful museum, I think.
Yeah, quite simply.
That's how Koderick 1988 asks, how looks you start with programming, guys? Did you earlier work for any company?
Not before starting Haven.
No. I mean, I don't know. We've been building.
I mean, my start with programming, if that's the question, it was just something my dad started teaching me when I was like 5.
Yeah. And
I just found it fun enough to continue doing that until now.
Word up. I have programmed significantly less in my life. But I suppose I started programming the first time in what was that, 8th grade? 9th grade?
Yeah, right. When we were all doing it. That was actually quite great fun.
Yeah. We were building games at that point already. Molnik says, stop fapping your beard. I can't hold it anymore, you sexy...
Oh, guy.
Oh, guy. Darkan says, I could use a good... Did you actually implement Fulgurite?
What?
The Fulgurite, the lightning striking the sand thing. Did you actually make it spawnable? I heard people had complaints finding it.
Good question, actually. I have to check that. Now that you mentioned it, I must admit I'm not entirely sure. Yes, I did. I did. Yeah, they don't actually spawn.
Yeah, you dig them up, right? Yeah. So yeah, get digging sand, I suppose.
I think so.
Yeah. Right on. So why the ability to store cave slime in barrels hasn't been added yet? Yeah, I'm gonna look at that at some point.
What would that mean, though? I mean, should it actually be a substance instead of an item?
Substance container, like a normal, like a matchbox or like.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess it could be, but should it?
Why not?
Good question, I guess.
I mean, it could be fun having a barrel full of slime.
I guess.
I thought it was.
Does that mean you have
It
to
was
pay?
suggested on like the last stream or the stream before that, and I thought it was a good idea.
Yeah, sure. I guess that's the case to me. If anything, one might perhaps even argue that it shouldn't be an item then, but only pick upable in buckets that you harvest your killed slimes.
I kind of like it being an item as well. Like you can
Okay.
pick it up and fondle
Sure,
it
sure.
and play with it, whatever.
Sure.
Like it's you know an actually gooey slime thing.
Sure.
Yeah, I think slime trap, slime dungeon could be fun, right?
Yeah, but I think we already have ideas for the next dungeons to make.
Yeah, we have plenty of ideas for dungeons. I mean, there are a ton of them. Like,
The thing with dungeon is that I'm really not sure if. I mean, it takes a bit of time to add a new dungeon. I'm
there's
not.
a fair amount of work, like generating a new and interesting layout for a dungeon. You know, from on my behalf, like creating all the content. Like there are 4 or 5 animals.
I mean, it takes like a month to add a dungeon. I'm just split about how much, to what extent the output is.
I'm
worth
also not sure on where the diminishing returns on further dungeons are. Like, I mean, I can't with my character beat bat dungeons. I mean, I can barely beat beaver dams as is. Like adding a new dungeon that is even more dangerous, blah blah. Blah, like you know, for me that wouldn't be accessible content. Maybe that's fine, but. Yeah, I'm not sure how fun or meaningful dungeons are. Like I heard some people saying that the rewards for clearing the bad dungeons were not significant enough for it to be like worth the time and effort. But you know, what would I know about that?
Yeah, just not sure, quite simply.
No.
It's not that it's not fun making new dungeons. It kind of is.
And it is fun, and I think also there's definitely room on the lower end. I think like ant dungeons have been suggested.
Definitely.
I wouldn't mind that,
Yeah.
and I think you know.
I think that's one of the prime candidates for the next dungeons, especially if anything.
And I want like a wellness dungeon is something I wanted for a long time, and you know that's there. But a couple of weaker ones would definitely be worthwhile, I think. But they do take some doing, and it's also the question of differentiating the rewards from them. Too.
Yeah, especially that.
And well, like really make them fun and meaningful to clear. So yeah. All right. Looks like we haven't had any further questions, and we're over time already. So I think we're just gonna call it a night about here, and sign off. It was great fun having Loftar on. I hope we can do that again in the future. It was great fun. With all the questions and all the interactions we got to have with you guys. There is going to be a May stream as well at some point. We'll announce that probably like 2 or 3 days before it happens, somewhere toward the end of the month. Never being the one to plan ahead. All right, Morgan Coxey says, thanks, Jorb and Loftar. You're welcome. All right, thank you guys. It was a pleasure speaking with you. We'll catch you again soon. Any final thoughts, Loftar?
None that I can think of, really.
All right.
Goodbye and good night.
Pax Vobiscum, the Lord be with you at all times. Let his face shine upon you, etc., etc. Thank you all for being with us tonight. And yeah, we'll catch you in May. Bye, guys. Thank you.